Disclaimer: this story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The events and characters portrayed in this story are the product of the author's imagination. Reader discretion is advised. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, and I found myself home alone for the first time in weeks. My parents had gone out of town, leaving me in charge of the house. The sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting warm patterns on the living room floor. Everything felt calm and peaceful, almost too calm. Usually, the silence in the house was comforting, but today it brought a strange feeling I couldn't quite shake off. I settled into the cozy corner of the sofa with a book, hoping to spend the day reading and maybe catching up on some much-needed rest. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional chirping of birds and distant sounds of children playing. I felt a slight chill, even though the afternoon sun was still high in the sky. My mind wandered to my cousin's son, Jake. He was the only family member who lived nearby, just a few blocks away. We had always been close growing up, though lately, I hadn't seen him as much. He was known to be a bit of a free spirit, adventurous, a little unpredictable. Sometimes, his visits would brighten my day with his infectious laughter and stories, but other times, his presence brought unexpected drama. I checked the clock. It was already past noon, and I thought about texting Jake to see how he was doing. Maybe he'd come over for a quick visit. Just as I reached for my phone, the doorbell rang. Surprised, I paused. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the sudden noise startled me. My heart rate quickened just a little as I got up to open the door. Standing there was Jake. His usual confident smile was replaced by something I couldn't quite place, something uncertain, maybe even scared. His clothes were a little disheveled, and his eyes darted nervously from side to side. It was unlike him to just show up unannounced, especially looking this way. "Hey," he said quietly, "can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, but then stepped aside, letting him inside. As the door closed behind him, I felt a strange unease settling in my chest. Something about Jake today wasn't right, and I couldn't help but wonder what had brought him here so suddenly and in such a state. Jake stepped inside hesitantly, his eyes still scanning the room as if expecting something or someone to be lurking in the shadows. I offered him a seat on the couch, but he stayed standing, pacing nervously near the window. His usual confident demeanor was completely absent, replaced by a restless energy that made me uneasy. "Are you okay?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. He stopped pacing and looked at me, but his gaze was distant, like he was wrestling with something he didn't want to say. I didn't want to just show up like this," he said quietly, but I didn't know where else to go. I nodded slowly, trying to understand without pressing too hard. "You can always come here, Jake. What's going on?" He took a deep breath and sank down onto the couch, running a hand through his messy hair. "It's complicated," he said. "I'm in some trouble, and I'm not sure what to do." My heart began to beat faster. Trouble was a vague word, and with Jake, it could mean anything from a small misunderstanding to something serious. I wanted to ask more, but something about his tone made me hold back. Instead, I offered him a glass of water and sat down beside him. As he sipped quietly, I noticed how tense his hands were, clenched tight around the glass, knuckles white. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. I felt a mixture of concern and curiosity, but mostly worry. "Jake," I said softly, "you don't have to tell me everything right now, but if there's something wrong, I want to help." He gave a faint smile, almost grateful, but then his expression darkened again. "It's not just me," he said. "There's something else. Something I didn't want you to get involved in." The room suddenly felt colder. I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, trying to guess what kind of trouble Jake could be tangled in and why he had come here alone. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and making the windows creak. For a moment, the quiet house felt like it was closing in on us. "I don't know how to explain it," Jake murmured, "but I think someone's after me. And maybe after you too." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at him, disbelief mixing with rising fear. Was Jake paranoid? Or was this something real? He looked at me, eyes pleading for trust. "Please, just let me stay here tonight. I promise I'll explain everything." Despite the knot tightening in my stomach, I nodded. I couldn't turn him away, not when he looked this vulnerable. As Jake settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected visit was only the beginning of something much bigger and darker than I could have imagined. The evening shadows lengthened as Jake sat quietly in the living room, his eyes fixed on the flickering TV, though he wasn't really watching it. Every so often, he glanced nervously toward the window, as if expecting someone to appear outside. His unease was contagious, and despite my efforts to keep things light, a tension filled the air. I tried to ask him more about who might be after him, but his answers were vague and evasive. "I can't get into details right now," he said, "but I'm dealing with something dangerous." His voice dropped to a whisper, and I noticed how his hands trembled slightly. As the night grew darker, Jake's behavior became increasingly strange. He kept checking his phone obsessively, though the screen never lit up with any messages. He peeked through the curtains more than once, startled by every small noise outside. I started wondering if he was being truthful or if something else was going on beneath the surface. At one point, I caught him looking at me with a conflicted expression, part fear, part guilt. When I asked if everything was really okay, he forced a weak smile but quickly looked away. I felt a growing suspicion that Jake was hiding something more than just trouble. The house suddenly felt less like a safe haven and more like a trap. The cozy walls seemed to close in, shadows stretching across the floor in unsettling shapes. I couldn't tell if my nerves were playing tricks on me or if something was truly wrong. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Tell him to leave before it's too late." My heart pounded. I looked at Jake, whose face had gone pale. "What is this?" I demanded. He swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding mine. "I told you, it's serious. And it's coming." The sense of danger was undeniable now. My cousin's son, the boy I once knew as carefree and bold, was now a stranger sitting across from me, haunted, secretive, and desperate. I realized that this night would change everything. Whatever Jake was involved in, it wasn't something I could ignore anymore. The question was, how deep did this danger go, and could I protect us both? After a long pause, Jake finally took a deep breath, his eyes locking with mine as if deciding whether to trust me with the truth. "Okay," he said quietly, "I need to tell you everything, though it's not going to be easy." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "A few weeks ago, I stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see. Something dangerous. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but people involved don't want anyone to know. They're ruthless." My heart raced as I tried to piece together what he was saying. "Are you in some kind of trouble with criminals? Gangsters?" I asked cautiously. Jake shook his head. "It's worse than that. It's about a group who operate in the shadows, people who use fear to control others. I think they've been watching me since I accidentally found out their secret." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of disbelief and fear. This was no ordinary problem. This was something dark and serious. "Why come here?" "Why to me?" "Because," Jake said, "I think they might be coming after you too. They know you're connected to me, and I'm scared they'll use you to get to me. That's why I came here, hoping it's safer." His words sent chills down my spine. I looked around the quiet house, suddenly feeling vulnerable and exposed. "Have you told anyone else?" I asked. "No," he replied. "I don't know who to trust. That's why I need to stay here for now. But we have to be careful. I don't know when or how they'll strike." The room felt heavier with each word. I realized that my simple, quiet day alone had turned into something I never expected, being involved in a dangerous game I didn't understand. I nodded, feeling both scared and determined. "We'll figure this out. You're not alone." But inside, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The night grew deeper, but sleep was far from either of us. The house that once felt safe now seemed vulnerable, every creak and whisper outside setting my nerves on edge. Jake moved cautiously around the room, glancing at every window and locking the doors multiple times. The tension between us was palpable. We tried to make sense of the situation, piecing together what Jake knew and what might come next. Yet, the more we talked, the more uncertain everything became. Jake mentioned strange calls and shadowy figures he'd seen nearby, but he couldn't say for sure if they were really following him or us. At one point, a sudden knock on the front door made us both jump. I froze, heart pounding. Jake motioned for me to stay quiet and peeked through the peephole. No one was there. It was as if the night itself was playing tricks on us. Despite my fear, I tried to stay calm for Jake's sake. He needed someone to rely on. But as hours passed, the atmosphere thickened with dread. Every unexpected sound, every flicker of light outside, seemed to announce a new threat. I caught Jake pulling out a small, worn notebook filled with scribbles and names. "This is what I've managed to gather," he whispered, flipping through pages. "It's dangerous information, but maybe it can help us." My mind raced. Was I ready for this? To be part of something so uncertain and frightening? Suddenly, the power flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. For a moment, we sat frozen, letting the silence engulf us. Then Jake's voice broke the stillness, firm but scared. "They're close." I swallowed my fear and nodded. Whatever was coming, I knew we had to face it together. The house was plunged into darkness, save for the pale glow of moonlight filtering through the windows. The sudden blackout sent a chill through my spine, making every shadow loom larger and every sound sharper. Jake grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and flicked it on, the beam cutting through the gloom but failing to chase away the growing fear. "I don't like this," Jake whispered, his voice tight. "They're close and they know where we are." We huddled together in the living room, the silence pressing down on us like a weight. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, and I could feel Jake's trembling beside me. The air was thick with tension, every creak and distant noise sending sparks of panic through my nerves. Suddenly, there was a faint tapping sound at the back door. Both of us froze. I could hardly breathe as the tapping grew more insistent, deliberate, almost rhythmic. My mind raced. Was it a warning? A threat? Or just someone playing a cruel trick? Jake stood up slowly, flashlight in hand. "Stay here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He moved toward the door, each step heavy with hesitation. I watched, helpless, as he peered through the small window. Outside, the night was empty, no sign of anyone. But just as he turned away, a shadow flickered across the far edge of the yard, vanishing instantly. "Someone's out there," Jake said, voice low but urgent. "We're not safe." Panic bubbled up inside me, but I pushed it down. I had to be strong, not just for myself but for Jake. Suddenly, Jake turned to me, eyes dark and intense. "I didn't want you to get involved," he said, voice cracking with emotion. "But now that you are, I promise I'll protect you, no matter what happens." His words struck a chord deep inside me. Despite the fear and confusion, I felt a fierce determination rise. We were in this together, come what may. The tapping started again, louder and more urgent. The night was no longer just dark, it was dangerous. The tapping at the back door turned into sharp, heavy knocks. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the neighbors might hear. Jake gripped my hand tightly, his knuckles white in the flashlight's weak glow. "Stay calm," he whispered, but even he sounded unsure. Suddenly, the door rattled violently. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't planning to wait. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with terror. This wasn't just some prank or harmless visit, it was something sinister. Jake moved swiftly, reaching for something beneath the couch, a small, old revolver. I gasped, startled by the weapon but realizing how desperate the situation had become. "Do you know how to use that?" I asked shakily. He nodded grimly. "I've never needed to, until now." The knocking turned to pounding, the door shaking as if it might break at any moment. We both stepped back, hearts racing, breaths shallow. Suddenly, the door burst open. A shadowy figure appeared, but before it could step inside, Jake fired a warning shot. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. The figure stumbled back, disappearing into the night. For a moment, silence reclaimed the house. We both stood frozen, adrenaline flooding our veins. Jake looked at me, eyes filled with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "They're real," he said, voice barely audible. "And they won't stop." I realized then that the danger wasn't just about secrets or rumors, it was about survival. We sat back down, still shaken, but somehow stronger together. Whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. The early morning light began to seep through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room that had been filled with tension just hours before. Jake and I sat quietly, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, replaced by a heavy exhaustion neither of us could deny. We had survived the night, but the fear lingered like a shadow. Jake's secret, the danger lurking just outside my door, had turned my ordinary day into a nightmare I never expected. Yet, despite everything, something had shifted between us, something unspoken but deeply understood. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," Jake said softly, breaking the silence. "I didn't want you involved, but now I realize I can't face this alone." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "You don't have to. We'll get through it. Together." In the days that followed, we took cautious steps to protect ourselves, changing routines, staying alert, and leaning on each other more than ever. The quiet neighborhood no longer felt safe, but we found strength in our bond, in knowing we weren't alone. The visit that started with surprise and suspicion had grown into a test of trust, courage, and resilience. And though the future was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. That day, when my cousin's son showed up unexpectedly, had changed my life forever. No matter what happened next, I was ready to face it with him by my side. 36.